It is said that the world is full of suffering and we all have a fair share of it too. But how does it shape us, and does it make us better human beings, or does it drive us lower in the curve of evolution? Let us take a look into that in this video. Hello friends, welcome to my channel All Things Spiritual. Today we will look into suffering and why do we suffer, and if we were Chidaranta Rupa Shivoham Shivoham, why then do we have to suffer? And if you watch till the end, you would know what a person gains by silently suffering through his or her ordeals through a story. So please don't forget to like, share and subscribe to my channel if you like the video. Sufferings are not just physical pain, but it includes the disturbances and modifications that arise and happen within the mind. And in fact, bodily pain might be far more bearable than mental suffering. Sufferings hide behind them the modifications of the mind, such as ignorance, ego, pride, etc. For a being that is entangled with his or her own ego, such a suffering would be part of his or her daily life. Such a person is totally attached to suffering and is not able to escape from its clutches. As a part of the being's life on earth, that includes birth and death and all that encompasses within those two events, and he or she gets caught up in the whirlwind of sufferings. It is important to know that you are its subject and object, or cause and effect also. You are actually empty within yourself, but now that emptiness has been occupied with the aggregates of suffering, namely the body, the feelings, perception, mental fabrications, and consciousness. They are but different aggregations of sufferings only, created by our past karmas. For example, we may be married but may not be able to adequately enjoy our married life due to either spouse having problems with the other. At the start of the marriage, everything looks good. A new married life seems to be very memorable. But then, what starts happening within 6 months to a year later? Where do those memories go? We don't even seem to remember any of those memories any longer. All we remember are those eccentric behaviors of our spouse, and we are unable to look beyond the negatives. We also have a lot of expectations from our partners. We want them to be the most ideal person that ever roamed this planet. Have you seen yourself for once? If you yourself are not ideal, how would you expect someone else to be ideal at the same time? And that too, that take a place of your spouse. Such a thought in itself is preposterous. So as a result of the underlying expectations, year after year, these sufferings mount in a marriage, and that leads to a strained relationship. Even though we live and breathe with the person, we are unable to meet them at a common ground. What happened? How does it get to this point? It's nothing but a mind that wants so many things. The mind's expectations are so many that the universe then falls short to meet the mind's demands. It generally ends up as a divorce at the end, and at that point there are not many places to go from then onwards. The kids from the marriage also suffer by not having a regular functioning family, and they have to deal with 3 or 4 parents and are constantly put up at different places due to different staying arrangements between the couple that decided to split up. So you see, man has to go through tremendous amount of stress while going through such breakups. Imagine suffering of the child and what they have to see at such a young age. It leaves a permanent scar in their minds, and they view the world, and their view of the world gets set up in a negative pattern, and they have not many positive aspects from the world. As a result, a doubtful mind is then created. No one can escape from the sufferings as long as karma is active and continuous. Therefore, like a shadow from one birth to another, suffering follows everyone. Fortunately, as everything else in this phenomenal world, sufferings are also impermanent. By mindfully watching its coming and going, or rising and falling of such patterns in the mind, you can gain direct experience of such an impermanent suffering. By impermanent suffering, it also means that you can hope for improvement and mitigation of your suffering through practice of rightful duty. However, do not expect lasting happiness to arise from the mind. The mind has its own ego and is not equipped to produce perfect happiness. The happiness which arises from them is always tainted with impermanence, fluctuation and instability. Apart from thinking of impermanence, you can counter sufferings by focusing upon Sri Ramana's question of who am I. By questioning the sufferings, you can let it dissolve and annihilate it from its own core, as they themselves are not permanent, and a questioning mind can drive such sufferings if keenly and mindfully observed. Your sufferings also have an empty existence. Where does it go? It goes nowhere except into nothingness. Therefore, when a suffering arises and a mindful question is asked to such a suffering, that where did you come from? Knowing that it is empty in itself, it just then collapses into nothingness. Sufferings are objective only. It arises and subsides within the non-self of you. A quick thumb rule I would use is that a suffering would communicate to you in a specific language, and then the mind would generate a desired emotion or anger, frustration or lamentation. It is also important to capture the incoming message so that you can preempt the mind from going into war with its own self. Say as an example, you see your friend, your colleague or your relative start to make good progress in your life, and there are discussions around that in social circles. You would guess you would be quite jealous of the person and feel that you had also made the same progress in your life too. It starts to get irritating when each and every passing person starts to mention the same thing. Now the irritation turns into anger, and when you understand that the particular status is unattainable, the mind then just succumbs and cannot be pulled back from that state. So you see, the ego made up something of what it's not, and hence it's tough to explain yourself, as it feels that it is that thing that can be only fulfilled by itself reaching to a certain position or a status in society. So it's not possible really to achieve a status in society, as it's all God's will. It is only possible, on the other hand, to be calm minded, and even if people say such a person has received such and such status, it's up to us only just not to hold that topic in our minds, but to move on and not to start a great war of Kurukshetra in our heads. Once we move on from such petty things, then the Jiva could be ready to lift heavier burdens in the form of sufferings that last him or her a lifetime. So then he can relieve major baggage of karmas and then be ready to accept the adversities of his life with a straight face and move upward in his life finally towards moksha. The story in relation to the suffering is of the sick man who was afflicted by a loathsome disease, and the sight and smell of which was nauseating, that no one would come near him or help him in his distress. And it happened that the Buddha came to his house in which the unfortunate man was lying. Hearing of the case, he ordered warm water to be prepared and went to the sick man's room to administer the sores of the patient with his own hand, and saying to his disciple, the Buddha has come into the world to befriend the poor, the unprotected, to nourish those bodily afflictions, and to give sight to the blind and enlighten the minds of the deluded, to stand up for the rights of the orphans as well as the aged, and in doing so set an example to others. This is the consummation of his work, and thus he attains the great goal of life as the rivers that lose themselves in the ocean. The Buddha administered the sick person daily so long as he stayed in that place, and the governor of the city came to the Buddha to do him reverence, and having heard the service which the Lord did at the person's home, asked the blessed one about the previous existence of the sick one. And the Buddha said, in days gone by, there was a wicked king who used to extort from his subjects all that he could get, and ordered his officers to lay a lash on a saint. The officer, without thinking much, inflicted pain on the saint, but when the victim begged for mercy, he felt a little compassion and laid his whip a little lightly. Now the king was born as Devadatta, who was abandoned by his followers, and he was against the Buddha because they were no longer willing to stand his severity, and he died a miserable death. The officer was this sick person who often gave offense to his own brothers, and then in this life was left without assistance and in total distress. The saint, however, who was unjustly beaten and begged for mercy was Bodhisattva. The Buddha repeated these lines: "He who inflicts pain on the gentle or falsely accuses the innocent will inherit one of the 10 great calamities. But one who has learned to suffer with patience will be purified and will be the chosen instrument for the alleviation of suffering from society." The sick person, on hearing these words of the Buddha, confessed to his ill-natured temper and then repented for his sins, and with a heart cleansed from the mistakes of his past, begged for forgiveness from the Lord. So, we need to enjoy the happy moments when they arise, but know that they will be soon gone and be replaced by other feelings and emotions. When sufferings arise in any form, pay close attention to it. See with mindfulness its coming and going and rising and falling. Practice equanimity with detachment, sameness and forbearance. With this insight and wisdom, cultivate right views, right intentions and right resolve to attain moksha on the eightfold path. How did you like the video on suffering? Please do let me know in the comment section below. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in the next video.